I'm going to welcome everyone to Pride Month and to today's webinar, which is supporting members of the LGBTQ plus community, provided by the PA Care Partnership in association with the Office of Mental Health and Substance Abuse Services grant. At any time during the presentation, please type your questions into the Q&A feature, which you will find by running your mouse along the bottom of the Zoom screen. And I'm going to say this again, because after our last webinar, I had somebody giving me a hard time because they had put questions in the chat that didn't get answered. And that's because the person, Jamal Ford, who is in charge, who is our host and who is in charge of providing questions, does it using the Q&A. So if you have a question, please be sure to add it to the Q&A. Today's moderators are Jamal Ford, that I just introduced, and myself, Nancy Massey, and we are both with the PA Care Partnership Grant. What can we do to create a safe and accepting community for our LGBTQ plus youth and young adults with mental health diagnoses? Missy Peters, wave Missy, System of Care Coordinator, High Fidelity Wraparound Supervisor at Blair HealthChoices, will talk to us about the work she is doing in Blair County to pick up where COVID interrupted. Missy will talk to us about being a person who is a member of the LGBTQ plus community, her journey, her experiences, and her motivations to do the work she is doing. Brittany Feaster. Hi, Brittany.
Hi.
High Fidelity Wraparound Coach and Facilitator at Blair HealthChoices will talk to us about being an ally to Missy, to Missy's community, and Brittany's commitment to being an ally. Bella Davis. Hi, Bella. Is Brittany's teenage daughter, who will talk to us about being a teenager in today's world and how teens are how accepting they are. Oh, I just blew that. Sorry. Let me start that over. And how teens are more accepting and inclusive of all people. And I say that seriously. That's one thing that I've noticed just in life in general, and the teens and young people that I know, the Gen X, Gen Zers, the millennials, who this is like a non-issue suddenly. And for somebody like me who's been around much longer, I just remember all of the pain and stigma that so many of my gay friends went through as they were starting to come out back in the 80s. And it just fills my heart with joy to see how Missy's generation is dealing with it. Now, for those of you who hadn't quite gotten into the room, I want to be sure you're all aware that Missy just had her.
Bella.
Sorry. Sorry. What the problem is that it says Missy right under Bella, and it's confusing. That Bella just graduated the other day from high school. We're very proud of her. Round of applause. And is considering career choices. And she also, you can see her teeth for the first time in 4 years. And so we're very happy for her about that too. Okay, I'm now going to turn over to Missy, who will begin their presentation for you.
So first, I just want to thank everybody, just like Nancy did, for coming to this and hearing. When Nancy first approached me and said, hey, do a webinar, I was like, oh, you have the wrong person. Like, I'm not sure what you think I have to say, but Nancy very much admitted up front that that she does not take no for an answer. And that is very true. So through some conversation, we talked about what this might look like, what this could look like, and talked about having an ally. And she's like, oh, do you have one? And I was like, sure do. And do you think she'd be interested? And I'm like, sure do, because she works for me. And well, she has to do it. So, and Bella was an easier sell. So getting Bella on board, I was like, went and met with her at home and said, this is what we would like to do. And do you think you could help us out? Take some time, think about it. And she's like, I'm on board. So that was very quick answer and very much appreciated. So I do appreciate Nancy giving us this time to talk and these great people for being here. And you know what, we don't have, but I will go there if I need to. Anyways, I will. So I am the member of the community. I am, I don't know, the one who speaks openly at all kinds of meetings, and I talk about wife. I don't use the word spouse. I don't use the word partner. I talk about my wife, and that I think is pretty much the word that Nancy heard first that clued her into it. And I also generally in the background of meetings have decorations that are rainbow in nature, and so it's not something that I hide. It's not something that I ever try to mask or make something that it isn't. So it's something that is me and something that I'm proud of. But through this, I've developed my 3 F's, which is my faith, family, and friends. Jamal hit a button.
There we go. Oops,
Jamal hit another button.
one more button.
There we go. 3 words: faith, family, and friends. So these are words that define me. They provide me much comfort, and they also provide me much conflict. My journey through this began in force about 20 years ago. No, in my late 20s, which is a little over 20 years ago, 20 plus years ago. When I first came out in 1997, I really didn't know how homophobic the world was, and the rejection that was headed my way. Rejection, not only rejection from all 3 of my 3 F's, from my faith, my family, and my friends. But thankfully, my life continued, and it continued to change, and I've learned many lessons, and I'm at a good place in life, and acceptance is more than rejection. So I have my 3 F's back, and all 3 have changed over the past 20 plus years, mostly in a good way. So my faith started as a kid. So Jamal hit a button. So my faith started as a kid, going to church with my family. I grew up with my mom being very involved in the United Methodist Church. As an adult, my mother became, late in her life, in her 50s, she became a United Methodist minister. But I didn't grow up a preacher's kid, but I grew up in the United Methodist Church with my mom being very involved in it. I left the church when I went to college. I left the church, not so much that I out of choice, it's just I went to college and it was different. When I came back as an adult, I went back to a United Methodist Church. And then when I met Renee and I, who is my wife, which you'll see a picture of her in a slide or 2 here, but we sought out a church. Church was important to us. It was important for us to find a base to build our life, and it was important to both of us to have God in our life. So we started seeking out churches. We went to Second Avenue United Methodist Church together. Things changed. We left there and went to Overflow Church. Things changed. We went and found a church called Element Church. And one more time, things have changed. Element Church shut down the end of September, and we were back to where do we go to find a church? And we ended up going back to Overflow Church. Church to me is a place. It's filled with people who accept us, people who don't accept us, people who don't really have a care whether we're there or not. So, but then my faith journey, faith is mine. It's my relationship with Christ. It's fed to me through church, but no one can take my faith and make it different because it's truly my relationship. So we are right now at a place where we feel as home, a place where Renee and I feel that we are accepted for who we are, and hopefully we'll grow with the church as the church grows. That brings us to family. So my family has changed a lot. in the 20 years that I have been on part of this community. When I was growing up, I always had in my head what I thought church, what my family was going to be. It was going to be the same thing that I always experienced. It was going to be aunts and uncles, and it was going to be grandparents, and I was going to be the aunt, and I was going to be the grandparent. And well, that has changed. That definitely has changed. But that's okay. It's actually more than okay. So life is good. This, on this picture, this is my wife. That is the beginning of May. We were on a cruise on a boat in the middle of the ocean and having a great time. Renee and I have been together for nearly 15 years. We've been married for 8. We would have been married for longer, but it took Pennsylvania a bit to come to its senses and allow us the right to be married. But that happened in 2014, and then we were married the following year in 2015. The picture next to that that's a huge combination of my family of choice, my family of blood. It is a group of us at the out of the darkness walk. And my brother is the furthest one on the right. He and I formed this group of people to walk to honor our sister
who died by suicide.
Thank you.
In 2021.
Yep.
Yep.
Sorry about that.
Okay.
So the next slide that deals with family. That's like one of my favorite pictures there on the left. So that's my wife, and that is Bella from 4 years ago. My wife was so excited to take their flags and to turn them into capes and to take these to the Pride Parade that was in Blair County. And Bella was just as excited to wear it. And it was a great time because it showed the support that we have from the family and friends that Renee and I have built. In the picture to the right, my right, I guess, I don't know, the other picture, the mass picture, that was just this Thanksgiving. This was our second annual Friendsgiving, and this is a group of people that most of these friendships formed from working together at Blair County Children, Youth, and Families. Most of these individuals no longer work at Blair County Children, Youth, and Families, but we are still a family, and we have decided we will get together and we will celebrate Friendsgiving, and we just keep adding friends. The more people that we meet, the more friends that we gather. It was at our house, and we had 21 people gathered in our house 2 years ago, Thanksgiving, and it was very anxiety ridden for me. Renee and I have no kids, and we decorate the beginning of November for Christmas, and we had decorations, oh my gosh, in every room and then some. And I was afraid of kids hurting themselves. I'm afraid of things getting broke. I didn't know where everybody was going to sit. So this year we rented a hall, and we just went and had our Friendsgiving at a hall because it was cost less anxiety for me. But so those are friends, and I think there's one more slide of friends. Yeah, so there's a pride picture there again with other friends. All of Brittany's kids are there.
I think so. Yep, they're all in that picture.
Yep, they're all 4 years older than that now, but
yes, they are.
Bella's sister is, or not Bella's sister, Brittany's sister is holding the
Our
baby,
youngest,
holding the youngest, Emery, and then in the middle is Bennett. And then one of our other good friends, Shannon, is there holding her youngest, Sagan. And then the picture to the left was at a wedding that we were at for a guy that we're all friends with too, and also works here with Brittany and I.
Yeah, he's part of our team.
But that's friends. So, but the word friend has many meanings and different levels, and social media has even created additional levels because you have Facebook friends, and you have high school friends, and you have friends that you go to work with, and friends that maybe in your neighborhood. But I just think that the word friends spans many different levels. I've collected a lot of friends on my journey, and I have lost a lot of my friends when I came out as well. But that's all part of learning. That was part of me taking off my rose-colored glasses and the beginning of seeing the world around me much differently. But it astonishes me that people who choose to end relationships just due to sexuality. But then that makes me realize that the definition of friend really didn't fit them. On my way to work today, I heard that today is National Best Friend Day. And I thought, well, that's pretty fitting because I get to do a webinar with someone who I consider one of my best friends.
It's okay.
It's okay. She keeps telling me it's okay.
Yep.
I wear my emotions on the sleeve, and my wife is probably sitting here watching this cringing because she knew I was going to cry. And I'm not even like 10 minutes into this. Well, I guess we are 20 minutes, but Brittany and my wife became friends at work. They both work for Blair County Children and Youth, and my wife came home one day and said, I found my person. And I was like, I thought I was your person. And she's
You were
like,
wrong. Sorry.
I was wrong. I'm just the wife, but Brittany was the person. So Brittany was her support at work. Brittany was her support outside of work. Brittany was her person. And then I got to meet Brittany, and I got to meet family, and we all became friends. But over the past 8 years and through some changes in jobs for all of us, I now get the privilege of working with Brittany, and I get to say that, haha, she's my person, not your person. But I just like Brittany, and I say to myself that Brittany and her family have always been accepting. But the word accepting to me kind of indicates that they put thought to it and that they had to consider it, whether or not they were going to be accepting. But it wasn't a conscious choice. It's just who they are. It's just the people that they are. I have never walked into Brittany's house without the kids running up and asking about us. And Emery calls Renee Frene, and it's always, when are we going to Frene's house? And the saddest part is sometimes my name gets mentioned, but sometimes it's always just Frene. But she knows that we're together, so it is Frene. But and Bella has just always been Bella. Bella has that. I can remember times when Bella will come. You came to our house once because you didn't want to go wherever your mom was going, and
Yeah.
you hung out in our backyard. And most of our friends who have kids are that way with us. It's Frene's house, and Missy happens to live there, and the kids come and they hang out, and it's like we're aunt and uncles, I guess, or not aunts and uncles, we're aunts. Sorry about that. But friends are friends, and friends who are real friends are the ones who don't care what your sexuality is. They just like you because of the person that you are. Through all of my personal journey, it's gone along with a job journey, a professional journey. I have worked in many different places through social services. I have learned and met a lot of different people, and never thought that my job journey would prepare me for the job that I am now. But the job that I have now, I have to be, I have a lot of contact with people from different places. And so the job that I'm at now, I work for Blair HealthChoices. I am the coordinator for the System of Care grant in Blair County. And the System of Care strives to improve the well-being of children and families. It values the voice and choice of youth and families and respects their culture and strengths and fosters trust and collaboration among stakeholders. And yes, I've read that off a piece of paper because that's a lot to remember. But through meeting the stakeholders in Blair County, one of my charges was to figure out where were we lacking in training? What did providers in the area want in order to better serve the youth and young adults? And a gap was identified with youth and young adult in the LGBTQ community, and what can we do to better support them? So I sought out a trainer and found Amy Shanahan, and Amy came the end of August and the end of September and did a basic LGBTQ plus 101 sort of training. And from that We asked if there was anyone who wanted to continue, anyone who's wanted to do more, anyone who wanted to become a champion and provide an area, provide a place where people were welcomed and that they were confident in the issues of LGBTQ community. So there were about 25 people that said, please include me. So we did. And we offered 3 more trainings through a training style called Cafe Conversations, where we sat and identified some questions and thought of things that we wanted to answer, things that we needed to know in order to move forward. And we did that 3 times, and then we said, okay, let's form a group. Let's form something to keep this moving, because we didn't want it to stop. And from that, we formed the Blair County Inclusion Alliance. We developed a mission statement, a vision statement. We identified that our 3 areas, our focal points, were going to be advocacy, education, and outreach. There are about 18 to 20 individuals on this group, spanning across 9 different agencies. We're quite in our infancy stage. We've only met 3 times, but we are new, but we are very ambitious, and we have a lot of energy and a lot of thoughts and desires of how to take this further. Currently, we're trying to start a PFLAG chapter in Blair County. We're trying to bring back the Pride Parade. I have met with the diversity director at Altoona Penn State, and we are going to start working with them in the fall to try to bring the Pride Parade back either next June of 2024 or October of 2024. We have reached out to we're trying to reach out to Blair County educators, not necessarily to provide them education, but to get education from them on their policies, the way their schools work, maybe provide them with some education if they're open to it, but definitely having a dialogue and an open communication so that we can better serve the youth and young adults at their schools. When I think back 20 years, I would have never thought that my life would be so reflected in my work. And it truly brings me great joy. It brings me joy to know that my employer supports me. So just a shout out to my employer. I started here in March of last year, and in June of last year, the clinical director was just bubbling over with a surprise that she had. She had this great surprise, and she wasn't going to tell me and wasn't going to tell me. Well, then she told me. So our side of our building has many tall, thin windows, and she put a lamp in every window, put 7 lamps in the windows, set them to timers, brought lamps from her house, bought timers, the whole 9 yards, and then put the color of the rainbow. So for the whole month of June, if you drove up Holiday Hills Drive in Hollidaysburg, you could see the Blair HealthChoices was lit up the color of the rainbow. So I've never worked someplace with such inclusion. I haven't worked places where I've been excluded, but feeling included was very important. So knowing that I can work here and I can give part of my time to the Blair County Inclusion Alliance, and that I can incorporate my life into my work, and that my employer encourages it, not just supports it, but encourages it, and allows me to work with passion for things that I'm passionate about, I think is just great. My journey hasn't been easy at times. I've lost a lot, but I've gained more. And this is all part of what I've gained. It gives me great joy when I talk to Bella and I hear the way things are now, and the way that she perceives them bases the way that I perceive them. I fear for them being my allies more than they fear for them being my allies. I've just witnessed people not being accepting of friends that I have oh, how can you be friends with someone like that? Or that goes against this. And it's just not a thought. And I just love the fact that neither one of these ladies think of that, and that they are just there for me and for my wife. And it's the love of my wife and the love of these guys that have got me to where I'm at. And now
Now I
Brittany's
get to
gonna-
talk. So my slides really again are about being an ally. I was the one who had to be had my arm twisted a little bit to participate because I'm not a person that likes to be in the center where I currently am seated. Missy came to me and she said, "Oh, Nancy wants us to do this webinar." And I was like, "Oh, that's cool. You should totally do it." And then she said, "Hey, I was thinking I could have an ally participate." And I was like, "Yeah, absolutely. That sounds cool." And she's like, "So, what do you do on June 8th? And I was like, "Coming to work. Why?" And she said, "Actually, you're doing a webinar." So that's how I became involved. And like I said, it's not because I don't want to be here. It's because I am shy sometimes. So, in prepping, even just today, Missy and I talked about, what's being an ally. My first question to her that day when she approached me about it was, "What if I'm a bad ally?" And she just looked at me and said, "What?" And I'm like, "But what if I'm not good at that?" And she said, "Why would I come talk to you about it?" Because I've never officially titled myself as an ally. I'm a person who just wants to be accepting, really, of everybody. We talked a little this morning, and I guess I never really pieced it together. But when I was 15, I moved from my home community. I was originally born in Bedford County and spent a lot of years there. And if anyone's familiar, Bedford is it's a small, conservative, very rural county, just south of us. And when I was 15, I moved here to Blair County, and that's where I stayed. But in doing that, I lost a lot of the community that I had in Bedford. And I had to kind of rebuild that here as a teenager, which, wasn't awkward or weird or anything. It was fine. So it actually kind of gave me a really great perspective because I met a lot of different people. Blair County is not the biggest or the most diverse, but it does have a lot more diversity. And I went from a high school of a class size of about 120 up to over 500. And I met a lot of different people, and they definitely still are very important to me. I have quite a few friends from high school that I've stayed in touch with. Some of my best friends are from high school, and that has taught me just how to be a friend in a way where you have to try and meet new people instead of just living with the people you were born with. So I guess I'm an ally. I'm happy to be an ally. Like I said, though, I've just never titled myself. And one of our folks from the Blair County Inclusion Alliance had even said, a real ally isn't someone that says, "Hey, I'm an ally," and stands over here waving flags, but just does all of the things and stands right beside you. So I do consider myself to be that. So just to share a little bit of information, and this came from Penn State's our local school. So for those who aren't Penn State fans, sorry, but that's where I got my slide here. And actually, I think Nancy and Jamal are going to include this slide and most of the things I'm sharing whenever they send out afterwards. But just to talk a little bit about what does an ally represent? Again, people who are supporters and defenders of the LGBTQ population. We are a vital part of the community. What we are for our friends and for our allies is an activist and a speaker and an educator. What we are not is an automatic expert on the issues. We are not counselors. Some of us are potentially, but not all of us. And we definitely are not a spokesperson for anybody within the LGBTQ community. And so I believe that's why I've always just been like, yeah, you do you, and I'm happy for you. What I like to model myself is being a support and being a role model, and to kind of combat homophobia, I couldn't say the word there, as much as possible, just through education. I mean, I'm quick to just say, why do you feel that way if somebody says something, as much as I can. That is a learning and growing process. There are still audiences I won't approach because of my own upbringing and some of the experiences that I've had, but I do as much as I can at home and within my family. And that's something that makes me proud, is that my kids, even my youngest, who's almost 4, she may ask questions, but you know, she's going to talk to people. She's going to love on them. And, you know, we talk all the time about, it doesn't matter if we don't understand it, we can learn. So that's my goal, is always just to learn. So that kind of brings me to parenting in 2023. And for those who are on here that know me, you kind of know my family. We have Bella is the oldest here at almost 18. And then in the middle, I have Bennett, who is 8. And then I have Emery, who will be 4 on Sunday. Yeah. So we have quite a few, we have a big variety of ages. And so that has been very interesting for me in working in human services and child welfare over the years, is that I can relate to a large group of parents because I've been parenting since 2005. Yeah, and the kids now are just so extremely diverse. So what I try to do within my work is to encourage parents to be more understanding, give them information to help educate them. And so I have a little bit of that here. So as I was kind of doing some official research, the Family Acceptance Project was what kept coming up everywhere I looked. And so I have a couple of slides. Again, these posters are through the Family Acceptance Project website. You can download them for free and use them in your home, in your office, your workspace. You could hand them out to families and youth if you work with them. But it just talks about behaviors that increase the LGBTQ child's health and well-being. So on the next slide is just a snippet of behaviors that help. There are a ton. I think they identified over 50. I'm not going to read to anybody because, like I said, they're going to be attached in your email afterwards. But just a couple simple things that we try to do is welcome your child's LGBTQ friends to your home. And there have been times where all 3 of my kids and I pick up one of Bella's friends and we talk about pronouns, which is very interesting with an 8-year-old and 4-year-old. There are questions, but I've done my best, and I still continue to say that, questions just need to be respectful as they are asked. Curiosity is different than judgment. So just some very simple things there. One that I really liked is believe that your child can be a happy LGBTQ adult and tell them that they will have a good life, because I've seen and heard people say that that's their biggest fear when their child comes out is, I don't want them to have a hard life. And just that one simple step at home can make a big difference. And also educating yourself on your child's orientation, gender identity and expression as well. That can be just a huge thing. And then the next slide just says that the more of the behaviors that parents and families do, the better the child's health and well-being. So you can see as the behaviors go up, that can lead to better health, higher self-esteem, stronger social support, better relationships, less likely to be depressed, 3 times less likely to attempt suicide, 3 times less likely to think about suicide, and less likely to have substance abuse problems. So that acceptance can definitely enhance our kids' well-being and strengthen our community as well. They also have a poster about behaviors that hurt. This one is a little harder to read because it's a little bit more challenging, but it says behaviors that hurt. Don't let your child participate in LGBTQ support groups or services. Don't let your child wear clothes or hairstyles that express their identity, or to pressure your child to be more or less masculine or feminine. And obviously, just like the last poster, the more of these behaviors that are present, you see a correlation unfortunately a negative one in this case. So the more of these behaviors are present, the higher the risk is. So 6 times higher risk for depression, 5 times higher suicidal thoughts, 8 times higher for suicide attempts. So just simple behaviors that can be done at home really can change the outcomes for our kids and families. And that's the work I do. So I always want to see good, positive outcomes for not just the families that I work with, but I always say, this is my community. So I want it to be healthy, and I want it to be strong. The next slide is just a little bit of information from the Trevor Project. If you're not familiar, Trevor Project has a ton of research, data, information for the LGBT community, and they do a lot of work to help trans people. But in here, you can see LGBTQ youth who live in a community that it's accepting report significantly lower rates of attempting suicide compared to those who don't. And then nearly 2 in 5 LGBTQ youth report living in a community that is somewhat or very unaccepting of LGBTQ people. And our area here, like I said, there's progress being made. Sometimes it feels slow. Missy mentioned the Pride Parade in 2019, and that was the first Pride Parade that ever happened in our area, in Blair County. And it was terrific. It was a great time. There was a huge turnout and overall positive and respectful environment. But then, as we know, COVID became a thing, and it hasn't come back since. So we're excited to try and help bring it back. I've never planned a parade, so we're going to learn a lot. And then my last official slide is just to shift from my own parenting, but into my work and working with LGBTQ youth and their families. Since 2014, I've worked in the human services field. I spent a lot of time working for children and youth, which is where I met Renee. And then she brought in these amazing cookies one day, and I was introduced to Missy, her wife, who still has not made me those cookies again. But in that work, obviously, I've worked with a lot of different populations, age groups, and LGBTQ people are everywhere. They're not just the kids. See, Nancy said you should make me those cookies.
Right?
I know. Sorry.
Bella too. Right.
Bella didn't get any. She wasn't there. It's a diverse. The one thing I really enjoyed about working at Children and Youth is you work with all ages, birth up until great grandparents, and LGBTQ people exist in all of those populations, just in different ways. So a couple little tidbits. I don't like to give advice because, as I said earlier, I am not an expert and I'm learning every single day, but a couple tips and things that I do. Well, I guess first I'll just say, like, SAMHSA has a page for behavioral health equity, and it had a lot of really good resources on it. So I believe it's in our resource slide at the end of this, and it should be sent out as well. And I found it very interesting. It talks to, it gives information for providers. It talks about initiatives that are starting, different research, things like that. So definitely worth checking out. Also, I put in here high fidelity wraparound. That is my current role. We have a small high fidelity wraparound team here in Blair County. We're fairly new and we are learning the ropes as we go. But what high fidelity wraparound is, if you're not familiar, is a team-based planning process. And we work with youth and families at risk of out-of-home placement. And what I love about it has the components that are like the strongest to me are cultural competency and then youth and family voice and choice. Those are the forefront. The family identifies their needs. We talk a lot about the family's culture, which goes just beyond, they're an Asian family, or that this is this family. They're yellers. They talk loud in their home. So I can prep anybody else that's coming to the meeting to just say, it's okay if they talk loud. That's just how they operate. And really to help have a better understanding of who that family is whenever we go into their homes. So just a little shout out to that. That's kind of how I like to operate. So I like that High Fidelity Wraparound really highlights that as well. And then just 2 pieces of, I guess, advice. I don't know. This is just things that I do when you're working with kids, youth, and their families. So remain respectfully curious. Like I said before, and I tell my son this all the time, especially just because he's 8 and he has questions about everything. It's okay to ask questions as long as you're not judging and you're just learning. So you can ask for clarification if you need. So if someone comes out to you and says, this is who I am, you can ask questions. What does that look like to you? What does that mean to you and your family? Also taking on the initiative to find resources to educate yourself, so that the youth and families don't have to educate you. Some like to, and that's okay. But other people are just tired maybe of having to explain themselves, or they don't want to have to do that, and we don't need to place any more burdens on them. So just taking that initiative to educate yourself as best as possible. The other kind of important thing, safety, is obviously a highlight across every role whenever you're working with kids. So if a youth comes out to you, one of the things I think is very important is to discuss what boundaries to use within the family. So if they say to you, I have a girlfriend, my mom doesn't know, I don't think she'll be accepting, really having clear boundaries on how you can address that when you're in the larger setting, or, how you should address the girlfriend, for example. It's not about keeping secrets from mom and dad, maybe. It's really about keeping that confidentiality, making sure that those kids are safe, because, whenever we leave, we don't know what happens, and we would never want to put a youth in danger of being unsafe, whether that's physically or emotionally. So just making sure that really the best thing to do to help support that youth. And do you want to read this?
Go for it.
Okay, so the next slide is a quote. This is our very graceful transition into Bella and her role here. We must recognize that LGBTQ young people face stressors simply for being who they are, that their peers never have to worry about. And that came from the CEO and executive director of the Trevor Project, which is an excellent resource. And I think Bella has more slides about that.
Yeah, so obviously I'm not nearly as qualified as these two are. I have experience though in being a youth. I've been doing it for 17, almost 18 years. So I think I'm qualified to say, the kind of things that I deal with on a day-to-day basis. And teens get a lot of flack, I would say. Historically, teens aren't treated with as much respect as older adolescents are, and people who have graduated. And that sucks because we have a lot of things to say, and we go through a lot on a daily basis, especially following the effects of COVID and being isolated from our peers and having time to consider where we stand in life, where we're going. And a lot of those problems were definitely amplified. 70% of teens have some form of anxiety and depression, and 55% are bullied, which only feeds into the anxiety and depression even more. And there's other problems, as you can see on the screen. I don't want to read them all, but my point from that is teens go through a lot every day. And sometimes our biggest concern isn't, oh, that person's gay. Why? Like, it's just not our business, because we all have things at home that we have to worry about. And it's not always a priority to understand an identity or disrespect someone for their identity. But on the next slide, I have some statistics about that, because queer youth in particular are at a higher risk of some of those issues that I had first listed. And on the first one alone, 60% of LGBTQ youth are not able to receive mental health care. And that actually also includes 3 and 5 cisgender youth. And this is taken from the Trevor Project Youth Survey of queer children. 73% of youth are discriminated against because of their identity or orientation. And 2 out of 5 youth live in unaccepting communities, like how my mother was saying about definitely not a great area all the time, but it is better off than where she came from and many other surrounding places. just last week when I graduated, we took a walk through our old junior high just to like see our teachers and stuff. And I noticed that on one of the murals on the wall, there was a trans flag, which was new since I went there just 4 years ago. But seeing things like that, it does give me hope because, you know, there's a lot going on and it is good to be silently supported for those people. And then on the next slide, people of color are significantly more discriminated against, and that also comes from a lot of issues within local communities, not just the LGBT community, but the areas that we live in where you see kids on the streets who are obviously not well off and maybe in need of help. And a lot of times they are unfortunately people who are people of color or not your standard white, blonde hair, blue eye American. So you can see that especially Native and Indigenous people are represented in these statistics very highly, which is interesting because they are usually the most least represented demographic in areas. Around Blair County, there is, in my school specifically, there's a 12% Black population, and everything else under that is an even smaller minority. It's just so broadly white across the board, and that plays into a lot of the ways that people respond to what we're taught, because these white kids have more privilege than others who may not, and so they may not even have the resources to understand their identity when they're exploring that. And then on the next slide. So with not having those resources, unfortunately, a lot of parents aren't able to be receptive to the experience of their kids learning who they are and trying to identify themselves. Some of the common ways actually are a lot of the same ones that my mom read off, are parents who are welcoming to LGBTQ friends or partners and talking about their identity respectfully. Things like that help kids a lot because it's just as simple as that. It is really just as simple as being accepting of a child who is just trying to explore themselves. And it doesn't have to be a big deal with pride parades, and it can be for some people, but for some people it's not. And the bare minimum is that can be more than enough to help someone feel happy and safe and comfortable in their home. And on the next slide, so the community, you can see 47% think it's somewhat accepting, which seems to be kind of the standard across the board from talking to my friends in the LGBT community and hearing other, like online reading about it. It's, you never really know what to expect. It's maybe they'll be accepting, maybe they won't. It's a lot of times up in the air, and it's hard to understand where you can be safe and where you can't. And a lot of times schools are one of the few safe places kids feel because they are interacting closely with their peers and communicating with them about their identities because they are in common with one another, where in the home that may not be a safe place for them, that they feel they can express themselves. So it's hard because their main community is school, and not knowing what the outside resources are for them, it can cause a lot of psychological effects on them. And that is what I have.
That's right.
Yeah, so that's what
Anything else you want to share?
I don't know. I'm passionate about this. I think coming from my mom who wants to be accepting everyone, I feel the same way. And like Missy said, it's not something I ever think twice about. It's just nature. Like, I don't know, I meet people all the time who are like, oh, I use they, them pronouns. And it's like, okay, that's fine. It's none of my business how you want to label yourself off of that, or if you have been, discriminated against, I'm there to support that. And it's not something I stand for people to be hurt because of who they are. But there is a lot of education, even from older members of the LGBT community, to learn. I think there's a lot of new things because of this generation of youth that's coming out of isolation and being, kind of not chronically online, but when you're online, you learn a lot. The internet it's crazy how much there is out there now. And there's all kinds of databases like the Trevor Project, which provide information and learning. And there's plenty of things that are new and developing, like neopronouns and xenogenders. And these are things that other older members may not have ever considered, but youth are finding and resonating with. And I think it's important that we start to educate on that as well. So, yeah.
Agreed. We always say, Missy asks me questions when she has them, and then I say, if I don't know and I can't find them, then we just trickle down to Bella.
Yep.
And it works out pretty well, most of the time, at least.
Yeah.
So, yeah, these are our resources. That's going to be sent out to you all with the thanks for coming email, I believe.
Yeah.
And that's Missy.
That's
Yay.
me.
It's Missy.
That's
That's
crazy.
her.
Thank you. You were each and every one of you equally amazing.
Thanks, Nancy.
You more than met this fantasy that I have of creating a presentation unlike any I have ever seen or heard before, representing the community, the allies, and the people who are upcoming and will be voting and making decisions and being our mentors soon. And I sincerely appreciate, Missy, that you were comfortable and felt safe enough to show your emotions, because since I believe that when we show our emotions, that we're letting everybody know that this is really how we feel. We're not playing. And that meant a lot to a lot of people. I could see that as comments were being made in the chat. And Brittany, I would say to you that, yeah, I think a lot of it is in how we're raised and what we see around us. But being an ally is still not necessarily easy. And again, speaking from lived experience, I was sitting here and listening to y'all and remembering something that I haven't thought about for quite some time, but going back literally 40 years, that in the general community, I would be called a name that I will not say out loud, that was very unkind, because I had friends and hung out, especially with gay men who were more men than women that were out at that point. And it was really horrible. And that I was dealing with some of the trauma that the people in the LGBTQ community were dealing with too. And it's encouraging to me to know that you're not dealing with that today, and or at least not to the extent, and that we've made progress. And then there's this lovely individual, Bella, who represents the progress we've made, who represents what you too have shown her about how people can live and be good and kind and loving. I can't thank you all enough for sharing this all with us. And it means a lot to all of us to have you here today. I had this really important question that has just completely fallen out of my head as I started talking. So I see there's one question that is waiting for Jamal, and I'm gonna let him jump in and let you all answer that one now. And when I remember the other one, I'll interrupt. So Jamal, please come join and be our host and do the Q&A.
Thank you.
Oh,
Thank
wait,
you.
I just remembered. The importance of the Q&A. Please remember, put your comments in the Q&A. Put your questions in the Q&A. The chat's too busy. We're not looking at that. So if you put a question in there, it's probably going to get lost. Questions go in the Q&A. And I also want to say right now, while I have everyone's attention, that when I ask you all to please, and I'll put this in the chat later towards the end, to complete the evaluations, I'm serious when I say to you, we read them, we pay attention to them, we do reports on them. And the last evaluation that we did, I had a conversation with Jamal, and we've decided on 2 of the webinars that we're going to be doing next year based on the comments that were in the evaluations of the last webinar. So we pay attention. So when you have the opportunity to complete the evaluation, please do. And now I'm stepping away, Jamal.
Thank you, Nancy. And thank you, Missy. Nancy, it's funny. I love her. We have a question. And it's sort of layered. So stay with me. Our friend Patrick wants to know, he would like you to respond to a potential misconception. His recollection is that the Q in LGBTQ plus is that Q is not only for queer, but also questioning. So from a therapy standpoint, a client may be an individual who's truly looking to sort out the intricacies of personal identity, questioning. So is it true that a therapist is not allowed to help process feelings with a client who might desire to not stay in the space, but instead gravitate away in a response to the questioning? Because that therapy would be perceived as conversion therapy and therefore illegal. If true, does that not silence a therapist sincerely trying to assist the client with what the client desires to address as a therapeutic concern?
That is a layered question.
Yeah.
I'll let Missy answer that one.
I can truly say for the 3 of us that none of the 3 of us are qualified to answer that question because we are not trained clinicians. However, coming from the community and having a degree in counseling, but not an acting clinician, like I would never think that a clinician should try to convert you from being Republican to Democrat, from being my favorite color is red, it should be blue. So there should be no, if you're in therapy and someone's trying to change you, I'm not sure that you have found the right therapist or the right clinician, period. And that's just from a world point of view, in my opinion, like what I know of the world. Conversion therapy, my opinion of my understanding of it goes much deeper than talking about it with a therapist, much more involved than just going into therapy. And yes, my Q for LGBTQ was always questioning. Queer was an insult. Queer was a inflammatory word, and it was not something that was welcoming to my generation. Bella has enlightened me that queer is coming back around and that queer is more accepting to her generation. Of all the words that have a negative connotation, queer is probably the most easy to my ears. To go into therapy and to say I'm questioning my sexuality, I think there is a way for a therapist to sit and to explore that with somebody, but to allow them to come to their own answers and not be in fear that they're being converted one way or the other. That's, to me, just not a way a clinician should handle themselves. So I don't know if I answered Patrick's question, only because I 100% believe I am not qualified to answer the absolutes of that question.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I do agree that, you know, when you're in therapy, I think it's not about the therapist trying to convert. It's always trying to help the person who they're trying to help understand themselves better and how they come to those conclusions. So I would wholeheartedly agree with your assessment there. And it's also interesting the queer with the Q. It's because growing up, like I said, growing up in the 80s, for me it was always defamatory, word, and to now hear that it's being reclaimed in a sense is always a little iffy for me, you know what I mean, and always trying to be respectful, as respectful as I possibly can to anyone, but if people identify that way, trying to identify them how they like to identify, I think is also important, but it's always one of those things that is a harder turn for me just because of when I grew up. So I'm with you there also, Missy. Have another question from Danielle. How can healthcare providers be more accepting and inclusive when treating members of LGBTQ community, or how can they become more gender affirming? You have any thoughts on that, Missy?
So I recently started at physical therapy. I have a pinched nerve in my back and I have to have physical therapy. And it's a provider that I have gone to before for I've broken both my ankles and have gone there for physical therapy. So I know the physical therapist and I know the physical therapy assistant. So I felt comfortable going there. And it's been a few years since I've been there, but they remembered me when I came back, and they absolutely remembered that I have a wife. So that was something I feel certain that we talked about then and we talk about now. But when I started going this week, there was conversation around, why do I always have to go to these trainings? I have to go to the trainings and I have to learn about what the plus stands for now. And I have to learn about pronouns. And why can't I just say, come in, do what you need to do. I'm going to work with you. And I'm going, I don't change the way I act around you or the way I act around that person. And I let them speak their piece and say what they needed to say. And I thought about it. That was Tuesday. And then I went back in today and I had the conversation with them. And I said, the reason you go to this training is not necessarily for you, but the training is for me. I like to know that when I have to seek out, when my doctor says, what physical therapy place do you want to go to? I think about that. I think about walking through a door and I think about whether or not I'm going to be treated the same. I don't fill out paperwork to say that I have a spouse. I don't fill out paperwork to say that I have a husband. I fill out paperwork and I list my spouse. And as much as some people want to think that my spouse named Renee is from France and therefore is a male, she is not from France, and Renee is her American name, so she's a female. So she doesn't have that fluid name that could go either gender. But so I talked to them today about that, like how I would love to know for other individuals in my community that are seeking out a physical therapist, would they be willing to hang a sign on their door? We're looking at, through the Blair County Inclusion Alliance, to work with Penn State to do a training called Safer Spaces, Safer Places, Safer People. And they have a 3x3, 4x4 sticker that they then give to you after they do the training that you can place on your door of your business, just so that individuals such as myself know when I'm searching out something that is a place where I can go and feel safe. Or they can put it on their website, which is more so what you're going to do in this day and age anyways. You're not going to go door to door, you're going to look on a website. So I try to get them to understand that as much as I hope that they pay attention and I hope that they are learning something from it, my ultimate hope is that they're willing to display that so that individuals such as myself can go there. So And I said all that, and I believe that I lost your question, Jamal. So say it one more time. I think I'm on track though.
You are. So the question is, how can healthcare providers be more accepting and inclusive when treating members?
So I honestly believe that it goes a long distance to be willing to display on your door, in your window, on your website, something that says that you are a safe space, that you are affirming to our community. I think it goes a long way to take a look at your documentation that you have individuals fill out when they come in. If it's a healthcare questionnaire, if it's a history, if it's who is your emergency contact, the whole spouse versus, you know, wife, husband, allow that to be designated wife, husband. When my wife and I got married 8 years ago, we went to the courthouse and we got a marriage license to fill out. Nowhere, one of us had to identify as husband and one of us had to identify as wife. Now, mind you, in our true Missy Renee fashion, we did scratch out the word husband and put wife on the document and handed it back, and did tell them that they should look at updating their documents because more of us are coming your way. But I just think that kind of thing goes a long way. We talked about that in our training, is just the paperwork and the language that you use. And it's about educating, from being accepting of people coming in and wanting to do training. Our Penn State Altoona Diversity Inclusion Advisor is looking to start with businesses throughout Blair County that are service industry, not just healthcare providers or anything of a higher education. So your person that stands behind the counter at your local corner store, for us it's Sheets, how to teach those individuals not to roll your eyes when someone walks in and looks like a man but presents as a woman, or vice versa, and how to talk to them without making them tell their story. That's a big point too, is that it's, oh, so tell me what your pronouns mean, and tell me, like, we just want to be us. We just want to be talked to like you would talk to anybody else. I don't want to have to tell you my story just because it interests you or because it gives you a little bit of, I don't know, joy. If I'm giving you education, that's one thing, but if you're just trying to like live vicariously through me or something, like, I don't want any piece of that. So it's, I don't know, paying attention to what you're doing and paying attention to how you're presenting.
Thank you for that answer. I think that's a very good way to answer that. Be inclusive in everything that you do, right? Show that you're being inclusive and accepting and letting people know that they are safe. I think Nancy has a question for you.
I don't have a question so much as I do want to confirm what you all were saying and make sure that everybody here in attendance knows that I will personally, so the email would be under my name, be sending out links to a PDF of the PowerPoint, all the resources that we've spoken about today. And I am also putting together resources from the chat. And that said, because one of my goals from this today was for people who in the counties who may be thinking about doing something and weren't sure what, anybody who, like Blair County, who has programs directed towards the LGBT community that would like to share the work that they're doing, if you would place that in the chat, then I will put that all together and send that out to everybody with the email that's going out. So I'd appreciate anybody who wants to share resources about how to start a program they have, etc. If could put that in the chat. Thank you ever so. Oh, Melanie Trump has already done that. Thank you so much. Okay, back to questions.
Thank you. So Shanine has a question for you, Missy. And in your personal experience, what made you feel most accepted? Was it a verbal statement? Was it just having safe space to be yourself, or something else?
Oh gosh. I'm not big on the verbal acceptance. I think it's just feeling it. It's a feeling that you get. It's not seeing the eye rolls. It's all the things that you don't see. So it's people not moving away from you. It's people not, like, I think about church and I think about people leaning into each other and they start their little chattering, and as soon as you sit down or like that, not witnessing that makes me feel accepted. People walking up and not being afraid to give me a hug in church or anywhere, or just having a conversation. And I truly think people asking me questions for education purposes helps too, and not just the nosy kind of questions. My wife and I went to church where she grew up, and she was unfortunately in the women's bathroom and got to hear conversation of two individuals that she grew up in that church, people that she's known all her life, like, oh, did you see who Renee brought? Who do you think that is? And is it, do you think it's true? And like, so, and love my wife to death. And in true Renee fashion, the people walked out of, she stayed to the bitter end so that she could confront them as they walked out of the stall and said, oh, hi. And she won that battle because they just scurried on their way. But I think it's the lack of outward signs of, I don't know, non-acceptance that makes me feel more accepted, if that makes sense.
So I have a question here from an anonymous attendee, and I'm interested to see what you would like to would you answer this from a programmatic aspect. This person says, for example, let's say a summer youth program just got their first attendee that identifies as a member of the LGBTQIA community, and they are not yet accustomed, the program, to this community. What should this program consider first before this attendee starts attending?
Education, seek out somebody who has done it, been there, walked in those shoes, and just to figure it out without including that person to figure out necessarily at first. I don't think there's any kind of problem with approaching that individual and saying, I want to be respectful of you. I want to help you and get the most out of this. What can I do to help achieve that? But they also have to have some background education. It's not up to that child to educate that adult. The adult needs to seek out education prior to. I think that's a professional responsibility. And then having that open conversation, though, is as important too, but it can't be the first thing. It has to be the second thing.
Yep. That's what I was gonna say. Get all the staff on board, get all the staff to the point where they need to be. Work out whatever kinks need to be worked out. If someone doesn't understand, how do you make them understand, or are they appropriate to be there? Have those kind of tough conversations first would be, I think, step one.
I totally agree. I've worked in a residential treatment, and sometimes I think in the past I can say I feel like we've handled certain things wrong, and not necessarily having to do with LGBTQ, but just in general. Like, sometimes you bring attention to things that make things worse in a sense or whatever. Like it's almost like you get like a rebellious thing or whatever, and it's like just like it's not like an announcement needs to be made, but education needs to be had, and
right.
And if you educate yourself on, like you said, finding somebody who's been there, a program that's been there, how they handle certain things, or all of the different things that you need to educate yourself on so that your program can be inclusive. But you don't need to stand in front of all of the campers and say, such and such here is, you know what I mean? Like, and I think that sometimes we try, by bringing attention to it, we think we're doing a good thing when it's like the worst thing that you can do. And it doesn't really help the person who has to now deal with whatever that they have to deal with, but it just makes you feel better that you did it, kind of thing, and feels like you took the weight off of your shoulders. So I think that's an awesome answer to that question. Time check. Kayla says, although I know this is a it's depends type question, would you have valued family therapy as a member or ally of the LGBTQ plus, or does the thought of it feel too personal or raise concerns? So I'm curious to hear some discussion around this as I'm implementing functional family therapy model in Allegheny County with Wesley Family Services.
I'm going to defer to you.
You can look at me. Oh,
Just
so for me, I think, yes, it depends. Where is the family at with the youth's identity or orientation? Where are they at? And then you have to start there. And I think that you don't get to a point where you know that right away. So you have to go slow and build the rapport first. And then sort of, I don't know, my experience, and we are not a therapeutic service, but we follow the family's lead. And that's kind of what I've always done, even in different roles, is you follow the lead and do what you can to, if you need to play middle ground, you do that sometimes. If you don't have the education to be able to answer the questions, so for someone looking for therapy, I can't provide that, but I'm going to help you find someone that I know can. And just sort of, you know, doing what you can, but we very much follow the lead of the family. If something's disclosed to us privately and we need to kind of, so say a youth would come to us and say, you know, I have a girlfriend and I don't think my mom's going to be accepting. You explore that with them again and say, what can I say in front of your mom? What can't I? You know, how do you think she's going to feel? How do you feel about that? Just so you kind of can gauge where they're at. And, you know, just having a lot of conversations about how to show respect. That's what it all comes down to, is being respectful to everybody. So,
I think, I think it's just like you said, it's about where the family is, right? I think when it comes to anything, especially when you're talking about therapy, there has to be a willingness, right? You can't force therapy on anyone.
Yeah.
So, you know, talking about things that people aren't ready to talk about, don't want to talk about, you're not going to really solve much. So you have to, like you said, gauge where the family is and sort of move forward from that point. And then maybe that they become ready down the line to have those conversations. But I think you're right in that you have to gauge what that point might be. Megan has a question. While I am open to questions about my transgender daughter, there are times where I react negatively to questions, mainly because I live in fear that someone will murder her for being who she is. So I appreciate patience when I'm responding to sincere questions about her. I don't appreciate personal questions regarding her transition or anatomy. Basically, questions that people wouldn't think to ask anyone who isn't transitioning. Have you come up with a good set responses for inappropriate questions?
Google is free. Anyone can use it.
I love that.
Yeah, I don't have any,
no, but I'm gonna use that.
but yeah, I mean, you know, I think I follow a lot of like queer content creators on TikTok, and a lot of them have really terrific responses. I don't know that I've not been in that situation myself to be able to use one, but yeah, anytime someone says, yeah, I have tattoos, they ask questions about what does that mean, and I'm like, means I wanted to. See ya, you know, that kind of thing. So yeah, I would just suggest finding supportive social media pages if that's your thing. A lot of the people who are out there right now that are very outspoken, especially about trans rights, they talk about that and how they handle it personally. So that might be a good place to, not necessarily TikTok. Missy doesn't like TikTok. So whatever your social media of preference is, there is a lot to be gained from that, I believe.
I think people who ask questions like that are very interesting. And I'm always trying to gain understanding. So I always ask, I would ask questions that would help me understand why they think that's an appropriate question to ask somebody. Like, why do you think that's an appropriate question to ask me? Like, like let's have that conversation. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, a lot of people, the comfort level is really going to vary depending on how assertive and outspoken a person is. So yeah, Bella would say Google is free, and I would be like, I'm not sure that I want to answer that. And we all would handle that, I think, differently in our own ways. It's free.
Yeah, it's interesting. So Rachel, that's what Bella said. She said Google is free. So I had a question come in. She didn't hear it, had clicked out for her. So I'm trying to be mindful of the time. It's 1:24. I know we still have some people who have stuck around for the Q&A, and we appreciate that. Thank you all for sharing your stories, your wisdom, your experience with everyone. It was a very informative session, and I appreciate it. I appreciate the emotion. I appreciate the care, and I appreciate the relationship that I see between all of you. So thank you for sharing that with us all. And with that, I am going to turn it back over to Nancy to close us out.
I want to thank you all again. And I don't want to keep repeating myself. So I'll just say thank you all again. It was amazing. You certainly exceeded my expectations. And with the comments that are in the chat, I think the people are here feel the same way. And I know there's a whole bunch of people that are sorry that they're not here. So we're going to make this webinar, the recording of this webinar, available on our website, and it probably should be there tomorrow and available for you all to share and maybe even use as a training tool. And so with that said, I think we really did learn a lot about how to support members of the LGBTQ community today, how to become an ally and why to be an ally and what you can expect. And it's also special to me to know that we learned a lot from our youth. And I will share this. There's conversations in all our meetings, and after a while, you know, it gets frustrating. Well, the youth aren't interested in being involved, and I'm going to tell you that's not true. The youth are interested in being involved. You just have to ask. And look what happened when we asked. And so I'm very glad to have you here, Bella, to represent your generation and the open-mindedness that we're all learning and hopefully getting better at from you. Okay, so our next webinar is next week, Thursday, June 8th, noon to 1:30. The title is There Justice in Our Juvenile Justice System? Our speaker will be Antoine Howlett, who will talk to us about his personal experience in the juvenile justice system, how he made his way out, and what he's doing now. And Jamal Ford will also bring his experience with youth in the juvenile justice system to this presentation. And we look forward to having you join us. And I thank you all for being here. We have 2 minutes. Jamal, was there anything else you wanted to add, or Bella? Or
actually, there were a couple of comments that were put in the Q&A that I wanted to share with our panel. Mary said that she's glad to see that you are keeping up your faith life. There are United Methodist churches in PA that are naming themselves as lighthouse churches who accept and include all. Also a great resource for Roman Catholic LGBTQ folks is the New Ways Ministry, whose website is online. I think it is so important that LGBTQ people feel created, loved, and welcomed by God. And Sharon said that I believe it's also important to train your staff, your receptionists, your appointment setters, etc. I often hear that while the actual provider is accepting, the staff is not always, and that creates a barrier. And that kind of goes back to what you were saying about, you know, when you go to places and feel in an era of inclusivity, that should be, you know, the people who interact with the people should be trained. You know, that's a very important thing. So I wanted to make sure that I shared those comments.
Thank you.
And I did see some comments similar to them in the chat. And I'm going to add in that information about and relate it back to your 3 F's, Missy. Sometimes there are issues with discussing faith in situations like this. And so I think I'm just going to relate it back to your comment about faith, and then include some of the comments that people have made about where to go. And you'll find my church in that list too.
Great.
So thank you all. And we're going to invite you all to go back to work. And do the great and amazing and wonderful things that you all do. And thank you for doing that. And thank you for being here, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thanks.
Have a great day, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.